on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You know, people have been critical of the big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden, with respect to his performance yesterday, because she was clearly just reading scripted answers to obvious, if not planted, questions.
Yeah, but all those journalists who submitted questions to him should be outed, because you don't do that.
Unless you're down in Brazil slipping questions to Hillary, of course.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
But hey, look, when he goes off script, when he doesn't have answers to read, statements to recite, this happens.
But we know this year's Hanukkah is different. It's been 65 years since the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. 65 years.
What? You mean 65 days?
Yeah, 65 days. 65
slipping,
days, years. Yeah, it seems like it's been 65 years since he was elected. For more on President Biden vis-a-vis Israel, particularly the report that at a fundraiser he suggested that Netanyahu and his government was losing popular support because of what he characterized reportedly as indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. Pleased to be joined by Karol Markowicz, columnist for the New York Post, co-author of the book Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. She also hosts the eponymous Karol Markowicz Show on iHeartRadio. Karol, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Indiscriminate bombing, is that what Israel's doing?
I mean, that's ridiculous. Anybody who is paying any attention to this war knows that Israel is taking insane precautions that few other countries would take to make sure that civilian casualties are limited, which is especially hard to do when you're fighting an enemy who wants more civilian casualties on their own side. So that idea, and it's really a noxious one, because the president should not be spreading Hamas propaganda in that way. They want more civilians to die on the Palestinian side so that they could show the world, look what Israel's doing, they're so terrible. But Israel is going above and beyond to ensure that fewer civilians die. And they've been doing that the whole time. They've been doing that for years. They've been absolutely engaged in keeping as many civilians safe as possible, which is really in contrast to Hamas slaughtering civilians on October 7th and in so many other situations in the last, decade plus.
So, Karol, you're the mother of 3 kids. You're Jewish, and I read your article about you wanting to protect your kids from the fear and the rage. But how do you explain these pro-Palestinian rallies? Because I don't know about you, but here in Chicago, now they're bringing out Hamas flags, the green and white Hamas flags. And that's that's bold. That's very provocative.
Yeah. I would say that I have been honest with my kids. My kids are 13, 10, and 8. So the 8-year-old really is doesn't know what's going on yet. But the 13 and 10, I've been honest with them, for a while that, look, you're going to see stuff. You're going to encounter people who don't like you because of who you are. And that's just the way the world is. And you're going to have to just live with it and deal with it and move forward. We live in Florida. I talk about that a lot. We haven't seen that kind of behavior in any large scope in Florida. But even in New York, before we left, 2 years ago on Thanksgiving, I told my Jewish family at Thanksgiving that I was worried about the state of Jews in New York. And of course, now they think that I'm some sort of, a future teller. But I saw it coming. Orthodox Jews, the Jews that look visibly Jewish, were getting beat up in the street. And I saw that nobody cared. Nobody was coming to save them. And that the only reason that we were safe is that we're secular Jews. We don't look outwardly Jewish. And that's no way to live. So I tell my kids the truth as much as possible. I try to shield them from the details. I don't want them to know about the mass rapes or the way that the children were kidnapped in Israel. But I do tell them that, look, bad people exist and it's part of life.
Yeah, and we haven't just seen this, how the world really is, manifest itself on college campuses in the Ivy League. We also had pro-Hamas protesters take over a school board meeting in Edina, Minnesota. Edina, Minnesota is, a haven for identitarian politics. So, yeah, and what's a school board supposed to do about what's going on in the Middle East? Not much.
Right.
But that's not the point. The point is it's a show of power. Who's in charge? What the the enforcement of opinion when it comes to this matter. And we also saw something, too, I wanted you to comment on. Just, we're focused on the college campuses, and that deserves a lot of attention, no question. But, I mean, some of the things that are surprising even to me, who I think has a pretty good handle on just how ugly the world is, this Polish member of parliament who took a fire extinguisher to extinguish a menorah in a government building and got some of the fire extinguisher foam and stuff on somebody a woman who tried to stop him. I mean, that is the sort of lunacy that is afoot out there.
Yeah. Well, I was born in the Soviet Union, so Polish anti-Semitism is not exactly shocking to me.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right that it's amazing how brazen these people have become. You talk about, what is the school board supposed to do and that kind of thing. That's absolutely the question, because this is what leftists do. In our book, Stolen Youth, we chart how they bring in these far left ideas into our schools, and not just college campuses. They start in kindergarten. In Brooklyn, for example, they had schools march against climate change. Like, what is my kindergartner supposed to do about climate change? It's literally irrelevant to their lives. And so you have this where they force feed this idea that you must be protesting, that you must be speaking out for their leftist causes very young, and they're starting it ever younger, and we're going to continue to see it. I can think of a number of different examples of protests throughout the country where they engage elementary school children in this. So I think that we are heading towards where people see what is going on, the big picture of what's been happening in our country. I hope sooner rather than later, and I hope people fight to have their kids not be exposed to this kind of thing.
When we talk about what's happening on college campuses, just to extend the conversation, you mentioned your kids' ages. In 5 or 6 years, when your kids are ready to go to college, is the Ivy League going to be an option?
Well, this is a conversation that's happening in Jewish homes, I can tell you, all over the place. I don't know. Again, we live in Florida. I think University of Florida has handled this among the very, very best. Ben Sass is the president of the university. His statement was no nonsense. They have not tolerated any Hamas protests on campus. It's been handled very well. So I think for someone like me, we're looking at University of Florida thinking this is probably the future. It's disappointing, though, because I don't think the Jewish kids should be removed from Ivy League campuses because of these deranged lunatics. It's sad that a lot of Jewish kids are going to be passing on Ivy Leagues, and that's going to create even more leftist atmosphere on campus where they feel like they can do whatever they want. Look, they've forced out these Jewish kids. They made Jewish kids not apply. I think all of that is scary for us as a country. What I talk about a lot is you think it's happening to Jews only, but it's coming for us all. For example, menorah lightings that have been canceled, and then you have Gavin Newsom canceling Christmas tree lighting. All of that we're only the canaries in the coal mine. There's going to be far more, you're going to see things like the Christmas tree lightings being canceled because other points of view are simply not tolerated under this leftist idea, and Christmas is absolutely going to be out.
It's sort of like the reverse of the famous Martin Niemöller observation. First they came and then they came for me.
Yes.
It's sort of the reverse of that. First they came for the Jew, right? And then it's all the way down, right?
That's right.
I wanted to get your reaction to something else, too. I know you're no longer a New Yorker, but I know you also maintain a nexus there and knowledge of what's happening. The handling of the matter of migrants in New York, Eric Adams is continuing to express his frustration with the lack of money being drop-shipped from D.C. to stand up more shelters and just provide them more money to provide the provisions for all those who are coming. What's your handle on where that stands right now? Because, of course, in Chicago, we're going through a smaller scale version of the same thing.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I give Mayor Adams zero credit for his immigration views. He has not moderated on immigration at all. He's not saying close the border. He's not saying let's get this thing under control. He's only saying New York needs more money to handle this. To me, that is a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and he is getting way too much credit for being some kind of voice of sanity among the Democrats, where I don't think he's that at all. I think he's a typical liberal Democrat who is saying we just need more money, we just need more funding, just give us more money. The problem will not be solved with money. We are taking in an insane number of people who are crossing illegally, who are not here because they're refugees. They're here because they want a job. And look, I'm an immigrant. I'm not anti-immigration, but there should be a process. And I was reminiscing a few days ago with a friend of mine who also was born in the Soviet Union about the process that we went through. Somebody had to guarantee that they would be there to collect us and to take care of us until we got on our feet. It wasn't government sponsored. And the idea that we're supposed to be just funding all of these people who are coming across the border, it's lunacy, and we simply don't have the money for that.
Are you surprised that Adams hasn't pivoted at all, given that polling out earlier this week had his approval rating at 28%? So he's obviously suffering politically, even in New York.
Well, it's funny that he's suffering politically because, again, he's not really deviating from the leftist argument about, to have open borders. He's not saying let's close these borders. I think he's just rubs people the wrong way.
Well, but do you think there'll ever be a time when he'll say just the breaking point and say we need to close down the borders? Because there's got to be some brave politician somewhere that's going to do it. But what do your friends say that are still in New York? I mean, how
they think it's a disaster. They think it's largely a disaster. So many services are being cut. They see, just the decay around the city. Even my most liberal friends are like, this is unsustainable. And they're hoping for a cash infusion to make it all go away, but they admit that this is a giant issue.
Well, and it exacerbates another giant issue in New York and Chicago and every major metropolitan area with more than a couple 100,000 people that's governed by the same ideology in different human form, which is public safety, right?
Yeah. They have very little expectation of public safety anymore. I think that they've gotten to a place where they're just accepting that, chaos is happening on their streets, and that's just something that they have to live with. I wish that more New Yorkers would make the connection between the policies that they supported and the results of this. I don't feel like they're there yet. They're still arguing about Donald Trump and talking about abortion as if these are issues that affect their city. They're not. And they're going to have to face reality. I would love for them to do it sooner rather than later. I have family in the city still. I would love to see them realize that the policies that they push, the politicians that they support, who support these insane policies that don't work, are the result. This is what happens. What's happening on your street is the result of that.
Karol Markowicz, columnist for the New York Post, co-author of the book Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation, and also host of the Karol Markowicz Show on iHeartRadio. Karol, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect